Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's stream, whether you are joining us on YouTube, on Rumble, or on Ganjing Word. And of course, a special thanks, as always, to our dear friend Red Access for moderating the live chat and keeping the discussion flowing. Now, tonight's live stream is not going to be light, so brace yourself. We are not talking about passing news headlines, and we are not doing a 5-minute soundbite analysis. Tonight, I'm going to take you on a journey across half a century of history from the October 1973 Arab-Israeli War, Yom Kippur War, October War, all the way to the so-called parliamentary elections staged by none other than Abu Mohammad al-Julani. Why I am doing that? Because nothing in today's news is isolated. When you hear that Julani cancels the Martyrs Day or abolishes the October War holiday, you may think, yeah, this is just another odd decision by another warlord. But no, my friends. What we are seeing is the continuation of a long project. The actors change, the names change, the slogans change, but the project remains the same. The project is about erasing the regional sovereignty of the people's sovereignty. It's about forcing normalization with Israel. It is about punishing those who resist and rewarding those who kneel temporarily. At the same time, they pull the strings at the same time that pulled the strings in 1973 are still pulling them today. So I would really like you to stay with me today till the end, because I promise you this, by the time we are done, you won't just understand why Julani did what he did this week. You will see how Anwar Sadat's handshake in 1979, Assad's defiance in 1980, the Brotherhood's bullet in Hama and Aleppo in 1982, and MI6 NGOs all over the world all connect in one straight line, leading us here. And once you see it, and once you see that line, you cannot unsee it. So let's start with our part one of our today's discussion, and it is about the October 1973 war, a turning point in Arab history. Let's rewind, my friends, to October 6, 1973. It was just like today. Today we're the 6th of October, 2025. This was on October the 6th, 1973. It's a day etched in Arab memory, though in recent decades, some have tried very hard to erase it. On that afternoon, while Israel observed Yom Kippur, its holiest day of the year, the Arab world, or Syria and Egypt, launched a thunderclap. At exactly 2 p.m., it's now 5 p.m. here. I think it is 3 p.m. there. It's 6 p.m. So 3 hours earlier, let's say, from now, a coordinated attack began. Egyptian troops stormed across the Suez Canal, smashing through the so-called Bar-Lev line, while Syrian forces surged into the occupied Golan Heights. To understand why this matters, we have to roll back a few years. We have to remember the 1967 war, the Six-Day War, which was more like a 6 day of humiliation for the Arabs, right? Israel captured the Sinai, Gaza, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights in a matter of 6 days. In less than a week, Israel redrew the map of the Middle East and shattered the Arab world's confidence in their own national armies. Israeli propaganda boomed. They started saying, "We are invincible, untouchable, chosen by God." Western media swallowed the myth whole and served it up daily. But here is the irony. In 1973, God seemed to be busy elsewhere. Because on October 6th, Israel was caught sleeping, literally. The assumption in Tel Aviv was that Arabs would never dare attack on Yom Kippur. The Israeli army believed the Bar-Lev line was impenetrable. Sometimes some of these words, impenetrable. So they thought the Bar-Lev line was impenetrable. They said they called it a wall of sand and steel. American and Israeli generals, of course, would later admit, albeit privately, that they had underestimated Arab planning. So when Egyptian soldiers crossed the Suez, they didn't just cross like a canal, they crossed the barrier of fear. When Syrian tanks rolled into the Golan, they didn't just roll over a mud or a sand. They rolled over the myth of Israeli invincibility. Let's pause here because this is very important. For the first time since 1948, the Arab armies weren't retreating, they were advancing. And here comes the shock factor on the battlefield. The Egyptians planned meticulously. Using water pumps, they blasted holes in Israeli sand embankments along the Suez, opening pathways for their tanks. Within hours, thousands of Egyptian troops had secured bridgeheads on the East Bank. Israeli commanders were stunned. One even famously radioed to his superior saying, "The Egyptians are flooding across. They are everywhere. This is a disaster." On the northern front, Syrian forces pushed deep into the Golan Heights, overwhelming Israeli positions. Damascus believed it had a short window before American airlifts would arrive, and they were right. So the Syrian army threw everything into the first assault. For a brief moment, shining moment, Syrian tanks could see the Galil below. Imagine the psychological reversal. Arabs cheering in Cairo and Damascus, radios blaring victory songs, leaders declaring the hour of dignity has come. This is one of the videos that was. Of course, my friends, reality caught up quickly. The US, panicking, launched Operation Nickel Grass, a massive airlift of weapons, ammunition, and spare parts to Israel. This was not a charity from the American side. This was Cold War logic. Washington back then couldn't afford an Israeli defeat because in the 1970s, Israel was not just a state. It was and still an American aircraft carrier parked in the Middle East, right? The Soviet Union, meanwhile, scrambled to resupply Syria and Egypt. Soviet cargo planes landed in Damascus daily. Advisors flooded the front lines. At one point, the Soviets even hinted at direct intervention. They prompted Washington to raise its nuclear alert level. Yes, that's how serious this war was. It brought the world closer to World War III. More than many people realize today, right? Within weeks, Israel recovered. Counterattacks on both fronts pushed Syrian forces back. In Sinai, Israeli units crossed the canal in reverse and surrounded Egypt's Third Army. Militarily, the war ended in stalemate. But here is the thing. Wars are not always measured only in maps. They are also measured in psychology. And here comes another factor which is very important, the oil weapon, which was used during the 1973 war. And this element is often forgotten, the oil embargo, right? As the war raged, my friends, Arab oil producers in the Gulf monarchies led by Saudi Arabia declared they would cut oil exports to states supporting Israel. This was the first time in history that oil was wielded as a weapon of war. And it worked. Prices quadrupled. Western economies convulsed. Gas lines stretched for miles in American cities. European leaders panicked, urging Washington to restrain Israel. Suddenly, the Arab cause wasn't just a Middle Eastern issue, it was felt in the wallets of European and Americans filling their cars. Imagine that today. Imagine Arab states actually using their leverage for Palestine instead of signing contracts, peace deals, and collaboration deals. What a concept, right? So we have the aftermath of this, which is very important, that is, in my opinion, overlooked, and that is the psychological victory. The question many people ask and say, did Egypt liberate Sinai in 1973? No, not entirely. Did Syria liberate the Golan? No, but both achieved something priceless: the destruction of the myth of Israeli invincibility. After 1967, Israelis genuinely believed and wanted the world to believe and the Arabs to believe that Arabs couldn't fight, couldn't plan, and couldn't win. 1973 shattered that illusion. For weeks, the world saw Israeli soldiers retreating, panicked, commanders calling Washington, Israeli civilians digging mass graves in Tel Aviv parks because they feared their cities would fall. For the Arab street, this mattered. It restored what they call dignity. It reminded millions that resistance was not futile. Even if the end result was imperfect, the message was clear: Israel could bleed. Now, after the war, we had different approaches by two countries and two leaders. Two leaders, two roads. I want to show you this video of Anwar Sadat. This is in the Knesset after this October 7 war. For Anwar Sadat in Egypt, the war was a ticket. He declared it a victory, and in some sense it was. He had crossed the canal, humbled Israel, and regained Arab pride. But Sadat used this moment not to double down on resistance, but to pivot. He flew to Washington, embraced Kissinger's diplomacy, and eventually shook hands with Israel at Camp David. For Hafez al-Assad, however, this was a different issue. I'm going to show you a video of Hafez, again after this October war. For Hafez in Syria, the war was also a lesson. He regained dignity, but he realized how fragile victory was when dependent on Moscow. Assad chose the opposite path: no compromise, no normalization, no Camp David. And so, for one war, two roads diverged. Sadat's Egypt went one way, Assad's Syria went another. And that fork in the road, my friends, is still shaping our lives today. Sadat chooses diplomacy. Assad chooses defiance. I will screen again the video of Sadat. This is in the Knesset. Here is where the Arab road forks. Sadat, emboldened by his partial victory, makes his historic gamble. He turns away from Moscow, flies to Washington, and embraces American mediation. The result was the Camp David Accords of 1978 and the Egypt-Israel Peace Treaty in 1979. Sadat promised the Egyptian people peace, prosperity, and modernization. No more endless wars, no more wasted budgets on tanks and jets. Instead, integration with the global economy, billions in US aid, and stability. But what did Egypt actually receive? Yes, Egypt received American aid, around 1.3 billion annually, still flowing to this day. But did Egypt transform into a flourishing economy? No. Instead, Egypt became an allied country for the United States, dependent on IMF loans, trapped in debt, and structured, unable to compete. The breadlines and subsidy crisis of the 1980s and the 1990s were the legacy of Camp David's peace accords. Meanwhile, did Israel moderate its behavior in exchange? Absolutely not. Israel never stopped building settlements, never stopped occupying the Golan, never stopped speaking of a greater Israel project. They gave back Sinai, yes, but they continued expanding elsewhere. So in contrast with Hafez, who doubled down on the military approach in this case, Assad refused to normalize, he refused to surrender Syria's leverage, and refused to abandon the Palestinians or the occupied Golan. He told the Americans, no Camp David for Syria. And for that, Syria was punished with sanctions, isolation, and the constant threat of destabilization. But what did Assad preserve? Some people say sovereignty. Some people say dignity. Some people say leverage. He may not have been loved in Washington, but he was respected even by his enemies. Because Israel understood one thing about Assad: he could not be bought off. And I believe that refusal, some people call it stubbornness, sets the stage for what comes next. What comes next is very important, and that is the Muslim Brotherhood insurgency between 1979 and 1982. Terror as diplomacy by other means. After Camp David, Washington wanted Assad in the tent. Jimmy Carter and later Reagan needed Syria to fold, just like Egypt, but Assad did not fold. So what happened? Suddenly, a violent insurgency erupts inside Syria, led by the Muslim Brotherhood. Very convenient. Convenient. Assassinations of government officials, car bombs in Damascus and Aleppo, a massacre of cadets at the Aleppo Artillery School in 1979. An attempted assassination of Assad himself in 1980, and finally an all-out rebellion in Hama in 1982, crushed brutally by the Syrian army. Now, the Western story is Assad, the dictator, massacred his people, but if you read the declassified CIA memos, the truth becomes clearer. One, a 1979 CIA assessment, now public, described the Brotherhood as, quote, a potential lever, quote, ended against Assad. I mean, that's a polite, bureaucratic language for, we can use these guys against Assad, right? Just like they did with al-Julani. The second is MI6, the British intelligence service, maintained back channels with Brotherhood exiles in Jordan, in Iraq. And these people weren't hiding. They were cultivating contacts, just like they were simultaneously cultivating Afghan mujahideen to fight the Soviets. 3, Saudi Arabia became the banker. Oil money poured in, disguised as charity donations. Arms were funneled through Iraq and Jordan with a wink and a nod from Western handlers. I mean, this was not an organic uprising. This was an externally fertilized insurgency designed to force Assad to reconsider his defiance and rejection to a Camp David type of accords for Syria. Think about the timing. In 1979, Sadat had already signed peace with Israel. In 1980, the US is desperately trying to get Assad to follow. And in 1980, the Brotherhood gunmen nearly killed Assad in Damascus. Do you think that's a coincidence? The Brotherhood's rebellion was not just about ideology. I think it was also about geopolitics. It was terrorism. And many people refuse to acknowledge that till today. And when Assad finally crushed the rebellion in Hama, the West screamed human rights. But they never asked who armed these insurgents, who sheltered them in Jordan and Iraq, who opened the checkbooks in Riyadh, and who wrote the strategy memos in Langley and other places. In my opinion, the pattern was set. If you don't normalize, if you don't bow, insurgency will be unleashed. As simple as that. Now let's move to Julani, MI6, and the West's new proxy and do like a fast forward to 2011. The slogans, of course, were different: freedom, democracy, Arab Spring, but the playbook is the same. Out of the chaos emerges Abu Mohammad al-Julani, the al-Qaeda veteran who now rules the Damascus. And just as the Brotherhood was armed and funded in the 80s, Julani too received his support. This time from Turkey, Qatar, the CIA, MI6, Israel. And here the evidence is explicit. I will refer to you to an article by Craig Murray, which you should definitely go and read it. Staggering hypocrisy. Craig Murray revealed that the outgoing head of MI6, Richard Moore, publicly admitted that Britain had cooperated with Julani's al-Nusra Front for years, providing intelligence, training, and weapons from bases in Lebanon. He also exposed the role of the NGO Intermediate, run by Jonathan Powell, Tony Blair's former chief of staff, as a conduit for support, for this support, right? Another brilliant article in this case was written by Kit Klarenberg. You should also go and read this one on his kitklarenberg.com or on his Substack, How the MI6 Helped HTSC Syria. This investigation showed how Britain not only backed al-Nusra militarily, but also rebranded it politically. Intermediate worked to present Julani's group as a governing authority, even recruiting former US Ambassador Robert Ford to meet with al-Julani himself. Funded by millions from the British government, these NGOs ran media, governance, and psyops in opposition areas, or what used to be opposition areas to Assad. They strengthened al-Nusra. They didn't weaken it, but strengthen it. Now, if we put Murray and Klarenberg's investigations together, I think the truth is undeniable. Julani did not rise despite the West. He rose because of this Western support, right? Now, from here, we could move to part 5, and that is Julani's makeover from jihadi warlord to a reformer. A reformer. And I think in this part, sarcasm is unavoidable, right? Because if you've been following the Western media, you've seen the makeover. The man who once appeared in fatigues with the Kalashnikov now appears on PBS Frontline, BBC, in a blazer, beard neatly trimmed, speaking governance and stability. It's like rebranding Dracula as a vegan health coach. I think now that we are approaching also the end of this charade in Syria, it reminds me of the think tanks when they publish papers like Rethinking Julani from Extremist to Statesman. This PR campaign isn't for Syrians, my friends. Syrians know Julani. Those who support him also know Julani. Those who hate him also know Julani. It's for Western taxpayers to justify why their money flows to Syria. And then Julani moves to the next stage, fake elections. I have made today a video about this. I'm going to show you this video because it is hilarious. That Julani now, my friends, is holding elections in Syria. And brace yourself, because these elections are, they're going to pick the members of the People's Assembly. But the only thing is, and this is funny and not so funny part, is that the people are not participants in these elections. So I'm going to show you this video that I made today, and I will post it tonight on X, because I do also short videos for my personal account on X. This is the video that I made, and I'm going to publish it today. So let's take a look together.
Once upon a time, and I promise this isn't a fairy tale, Syrians were told they were on the cusp of a grand democratic experiment. For over a decade, Western politicians and their loyal press chorused the same refrain: support the people's democratic movement, topple al-Assad, and democracy will bloom in Damascus like jasmine in the spring. What they left out was that this so-called democracy would one day be led by none other than Abu Mohammad al-Julani, a man whose resume makes bin Laden looks like a Sunday school teacher. Fast forward to October 2025. Julani, the self-appointed president of the new Syria, or should we say the CIA and MI6's favorite audition tape, staged what his media handlers breathlessly called elections for a brand new People's Assembly. If you're picturing ballot boxes, long lines of hopeful citizens, and ink-stained fingers raised proudly in the air, you are in the wrong theater. This production had no audience, no suspense, and certainly no people. It was the kind of a play where the director already wrote the ending and handpicked the cast months ago. The math itself gives away the joke. The People's Assembly boasts 210 seats, but only 140 are technically up for grabs. The other 70 are Julani's personal gift basket, reserved for loyalists, cronies, and whoever else he needs to keep this house of cards standing. Imagine a poker game where the dealer not only shuffles the deck, but also decides half the winners before the cards hit the table. That's electoral reform in Julani's Wonderland. Now let's follow the plot as described by critics. It begins with Julani himself appointing an electoral high commission. This noble body then forms little subcommittees, 3 handpicked folks per province, who in turn select members of an electoral college. Sounds familiar? Yes, like the US system. Except here, there is no messy campaigning, no debates, and absolutely no participation from the general public. If you are not in the inner circle, you don't vote, you don't run, and you don't matter. Congratulations, democracy achieved. But even this charade has its limits. Entire regions, Sweda in the south, home to the Syrian Druze, and the East Euphrates, home to the Syrian Kurds and Arabs, were simply crossed off the guest list. Julani explained the snub by pointing to ongoing conflict in those areas. How convenient, because the areas controlled by Julani are beacons of stability, right? Of course, Syrian state media dutifully rolled out its thesaurus of propaganda: elections, participation, legitimacy. But scratch the surface and you will find only stage props. Committees appointing committees, smokes and mirrors leading to the same predetermined outcome. It's a pantomime designed not to empower Syrians, but to entrench divisions, all under the guise of constitutional order. The so-called People's Assembly is less a parliament and more a rubber stamp, ready to bless Julani's decrees with the illusion of consensus. In the end, Julani's elections are neither democratic nor Syrian. They are the political equivalent of a counterfeit brand, a knockoff parliament assembled in Idlib's backroom bazaars, sold to the world as the genuine article. But Syrians know better. They know when the ballot box is empty and the parliament is a puppet show. So next time you hear breathless reports about new Syria's democratic process. Remember, this isn't the story of people choosing their leaders. It is the story of a leader choosing his people. And in this theater, the tickets are free, but the audience never shows up.
So these elections are not about the people choosing their leaders, but the leader choosing his own leader. This is the funniest elections I have ever seen. Even under Assad dictatorship, we haven't had a funny election like this. So this is the Syrian election, a visual explainer, my friends. The president, self-appointed president of the country, Abu Mohammad al-Julani, he personally selects 1/3 of the parliament. So 70 members of the People's Assembly are selected by himself. And Julani also appoints members of the Higher Committee for People's Assembly elections, who appoints members of 62 subcommittees on district level. And this approves 140 electoral bodies. Each of these electoral bodies has 50 members. There is one body per parliamentary seat. Some districts have more than one body. And these bodies that are selected by subcommittees, that is selected by Higher Committee of People's Assembly, which is appointed by Julani, choose the other 140 members of parliament. Basically, out of 220 members of parliament, how many are this? 210 of them are picked and selected by Julani himself. Our friend Marwa posted this cartoon, which perfectly sums up this sham of an election. So our new parliament, my friends, is going to be like this, exactly. Congratulations for all the democratic activists in Syria who have been so active in the past years. And I want to ask one question, and this question is directed at, respectfully, I'm talking now, to the Young Turks in the US. The Young Turks, Ana Kasparian, they have done entire coverage about the last presidential elections in Syria under the Assad rule. And she was so excited and motivated in delegitimizing that elections under Assad, calling it a sham elections and calling for his ouster. And her so-called experts on Syria, who know nothing about nothing, basically, they have been discussing Syria, not knowing anything about anything. Now that Julani is also engaged in sham elections, is she going to cover that? Is she going to cover that? That's the question. I don't think so. I think they will continue to double down, unfortunately. I truly hope that Ana Kasparian would change her position about what happened in Syria, because it was very destructive. And this was in 2021. Ana Kasparian and Francesca Fiorentini, she blocked me, this Francesca Fiorentini of the Young Turks, think it's okay to remove foreign leaders by the US, but they prefer soft power over arming terrorists. Take a look.
As we look towards reconstruction, you're like, man, what is the role of internationalism right now? What is the role we want the United States to play? For sure, we are against intervention, we're against imperialism, but what is the role? How can we, strengthen the international community so that, we can actually, sideline dictators and promote people who agree with democracy, right? But in a diplomatic way, not in an arming rebels kind of way.
This Francesca, she's like, oh, look, we are against imperialism, Habibi. We don't like intervention. We don't like to overthrow governments through military force. We don't like to arm rebels to overthrow a dictatorship. But look, let's do it in a diplomatic way. Let's do it tacitly. Let's not show the world that we are a fucking imperialist. We're hiding under a lefty umbrella, and we're just telling the people, look, we like democracy, and we're just spreading it in a diplomatic way. Where the fact is, she's saying, let's spread our democracy through these NGOs and create color revolutions without sending weapons and arming rebels. I mean, come on, it's 2021. That's a very old-fashioned way of overthrowing legitimate governments. Let's do it in a more modern way, let's use soft power instead of hard power. I mean, if you look at yourself, Francesca, in the mirror, don't you see yourself as a clown? You're just promoting for sidelining foreign leaders through diplomacy instead of foreign force. You're a fucking imperialist. You're also diseased and infected with intellectual imperialism like Anna Kasparian, and you both ladies think that you have the moral superiority to overthrow other governments and tell us how we should govern ourselves. You're a fucking imperialist. If nobody told you this before, I'm telling you now. Shame on you. Both of you are fucking imperialists.
Those were the old days when when I was an angry man.
And civilians themselves. So as we look toward reconstruction, you're like, man, what is the role of internationalism right now? What is the role we want the United States to play? For sure, we are against intervention. We're against imperialism.
No,
but what
not.
is the role? How can we, strengthen the international community so that, we can actually, sideline dictators and promote people who would.
We want a sideline dictate. We're anti-interventionists, but we want to, sideline dictators. You mean we want to we're against intervention, but we want to overthrow governments in other countries. But I don't want to intervene.
Yeah, I think this would add some question marks now. Will they cover the sham elections in Syria? This is a question mark directed at the people in Young Turks. Maybe you could cut this video and send them. Will Anna Kasparian do it? And if Anna Kasparian is honest about rethinking her position on the Middle East because she is passionately defending the Palestinians nowadays, and she said she was wrong on some of the things she used to believe in, I am ready, because she was born in Syria, by the way, in Damascus, and then moved to Armenia, and then from Armenia to LA or to the US or whatever. As fellow citizens of Syria, I don't know if you still carry the Syrian nationality, but we were born, both of us born in Syria. I would love to come to your show and talk about the Syrian war from the beginning to the end, and you challenge me with your facts, and I'm available to respectfully participate in a discussion and conversation about the Syrian war. I don't know if she will do it, but this is my offer. Let's go to some conclusions, my friends, from today's show. Lessons from geopolitical conclusions. So what do we take from all of this that we discussed today? We learned that insurgencies in Syria are never just local. They are always cultivated, funded, and directed by outside forces. We learned that al-Julani is not a Syrian leader. He is an updated software package of the same Muslim Brotherhood insurgency that Washington and London used in the 1980s. We learned that erasing holidays like October 6th and the Martyrs Day is not modernization. By the way, the Martyrs Day is the day the Syrians and the Lebanese commemorate and celebrate their freedom and independence from the Ottoman Empire and the occupation that they lived through for 400 years. al-Julani abolished that day to appease Turkey and abolished the October Victory Day to appease Israel. I think this is a historical erasure. This is an attempt to wipe out our history and to replace it with defeatism. And we see Julani for what he truly is, right? On this channel, we have been saying it over and over again. He is the modern day Eli Cohen, a man installed not to serve Syrians, but to serve foreign interests, a collaborator dressed as a statesman, applauded by think tanks. Doesn't matter, because Syrians roll their eyes at this charade. I cannot believe that there are so many people buying into this, seriously. Anna says that she's born in Syria, in Damascus. The other day, I was also surprised to learn that while she was on Tucker Carlson's show, she mentioned that she was born in Damascus. I think a few months later, her parents moved to Armenia, and she moved with them, of course. And then they resettled in the US. This is what I learned from her. So, my friends, tonight was traced the line from the 1973 to 2025. We saw Anwar Sadat's gamble on diplomacy. We saw Assad's gamble on defiance, the weaponization of the Muslim Brotherhood, the rise of Julani as Muslim Brotherhood 2.0, his glossy PR makeover, his fake elections, and his erasure of Syria's national memory. I think this is not a new story. This is a continuation of an old story. And unless we recognize the patterns, we are doomed to watch them repeat. I don't delete any comments, my friends, on this channel, and our moderator with access also doesn't delete comments unless someone is cursing and somebody is engaging in active trolling. So Anna Kasparian was born in Los Angeles, California, 1986. She's a daughter of Armenian immigrant parents, and she grew up in Reseda. She mentioned, maybe she said her father was born in Damascus. I'm not sure, but this is what she said. So she has Syrian roots. I'm trying to see if there was something that I had to respond, because I have really tried to pack everything into this stream in the past 45 minutes. So if you found value, my friends, in today's analysis, please take a moment to like this video. Very easy. Thumbs up. It's free. Share this video with your friends and subscribe to Syriana Analysis so you don't miss future streams. To be honest, these small actions help us break through the censorship algorithms. As you know, the alternative media outlets are mostly suppressed unless you are jumping around the words. Here we are talking like naked facts. So if you would if you like to support this channel, it would be amazing if you just click and hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. And if you would like to go a step further, consider supporting Syriana Analysis on Patreon. So Patreon is an amazing platform for me. Your contributions on Patreon is mostly helping me, big or small, by the way, helping me remain independent, keep producing in-depth geopolitical analysis, and bring you perspective you simply won't hear in mainstream media. You will find the link of Patreon scrolling now on the screen. It is in the description below. And the easiest way to do is simply scanning this QR code on the right or left side of the screen. You could jump to the Patreon page and support this channel. Thank you once again, my friends, for tuning in, whether on YouTube, on Rumble, or on Ganjing World. And special thanks to our moderator, Red Access, and all of you in the live chat for keeping the discussion sharp and engaging. Until next time, until next time, this is Kevork Almassian for Syriana Analysis. Stay informed, stay critical, and see you in the next stream. And before you leave, maybe, just maybe, I want to show you a funny video for those who understand German and Arabic. The other day, I was interviewed by an international TV about the possible escalation in the Middle East, and somebody interrupted me as I was giving an answer and told me in German, "You're not allowed to record in the street." And this is my response to him in Arabic and in German. So I will show you this, but peace be upon you, upon your families, my friends, and I will see you tomorrow. And thank you so much, Kevork Almassian, for gifting a Syriana Analysis membership. Take a look.
I will define what lasting peace means for me as someone who comes from the Levant, West Asia, or as they call the Middle East. There has to be a formula of one-state solution in Palestine where the Arabs, whether Christians or Muslims, and Jewish people are equal in front of the Constitution and in front of a state. In a situation where Trump proposes one-state solution under the Israeli sovereignty, where the party of Benjamin Netanyahu and his charter in his political... Du bist in öffentliche Sphäre hier. Sorry. I will define